WBNE.
Hello and welcome to episode 153, all about the Silmarillion, chapter 14 of the Realms of Beleriand, aka the most unreadable piece of literature I've ever experienced in my life, being the 153rd part of That's What I'm Talking About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, and right now I'm reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. Today I'm joined by Silmaremily.
Yes.
Silmaremily. There we go. From TikTok. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. You've been constantly requested by a lot of people when I ask for, like, especially on TikTok, when I'm like, who are some creators on here? Yeah. And so gosh. I'm like, the Silmarillion is really where I'm connecting with, I'd say, like, some of the best people, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Because everyone is so fun and knowledgeable and friendly. Right. So, well, why don't you tell me and the listeners a little bit about your history with Lord of the Rings and Tolkien? How did you get introduced to it?
Yeah, so my mom is like the Lord of the Rings aficionado in my family. She like destroyed her copies growing up, and I kind of got into it in high school. She bought me a box set for Christmas. I picked up The Hobbit and got one page in and I put it down. I could not get into it. So then I tried the, Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think I got a little bit into Fellowship, again, gave up. And then I started on Return of the King, and I think kind of got partway through and then gave up again. And then a couple of years later, I was actually working in my school's library, and they were phasing out some like books that hadn't been checked out in a while, and I had the opportunity to look through them first, and one of them was the Silmarillion. It hadn't been checked out in like years.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say they were phasing out The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I'm like, that's bad. That says a lot about.
It was this like tattered old copy of the Silmarillion, and I was like, hey, can I have this? Like, just have it. And the librarian said, sure. So I just kind of started reading it. I had an internship over the summer, and whenever I wasn't doing anything, I would just pick up the Silmarillion. And I actually read the Silmarillion first before I ever read completely any of the other like Lord of the Rings.
That's wild to me.
And nobody gets, and I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I do have the same copy, which I did annotate. I used the little flags.
Wow.
I at one point also had like a notebook filled with like anytime somebody would mention who somebody was related to, I would like add it to this family tree that I had. I would write down just like important tidbits of like when people were mentioned. I think I've since lost it. But
yeah, like that notebook would be, you would need like 20 notebooks.
It was a lot of pages. It was one of those like little fold over where it's like the page and you just kind of fold them over. And I think it was like half of this fold over notebook full of these Silmarillion notes. But yes, I did recently read the actual Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time in its entirety. And I have to say, I still prefer the Silmarillion, which I know is such an unpopular opinion. But yeah, that's sort of like my history, my background, where I'm at right now in terms of like the books and obviously the movies. Everybody, loves and knows the movies, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, I think that makes you an even better person to come on for this chapter. Because listeners well, first, before I get into that, I do want to say real quick though, you are like at the top of my like, I don't know, good noodle column because you made videos about how Faramir would be worthy and is like kind of more worthy than Sam to pick up Thor's hammer. And I absolutely agree with you. Like I love, like, I don't think I can emphasize to you how much I love Faramir.
Oh my god.
And so seeing that you made, so I was like scrolling through your profile before we got on to be like, what has she made recently?
Yeah.
And saw one of your videos that just said Faramir greater than Sam. And I was like, yes, girl,
I did it for the clickbait, y'all.
Oh my gosh. You pulled me in.
Sam has so many fans, like rightly so. He's a wonderful character. But I feel like he's become this like, nobody can be greater than Sam, like kind of character. Like if you don't like Sam, you're like bad. I don't know. It just bothers me.
Reading, I don't know how you felt reading it, because watching the movies, Sam is a little more tolerable. I was very annoyed by him reading the book. I was so annoyed by him.
Yeah.
So I did not like Sam. He's not exactly my favorite character, even with the movies.
Yeah.
So
there was a lot of characters that like flip-flopped for me in terms of like books versus movies. Like I think movie Aragorn is 100 times better than book Aragorn. And I found that about a lot of characters, but for me, it's definitely, like you said, like movie Sam, he's not one of my favorites, but I do like him much better than book Sam. I don't know why, it just like, but yeah. Faramir is like, I love movie and book Faramir, so I did not know that you had the same opinion. That makes me so happy.
Yes. Oh my God, like I could give a TED Talk on it.
Yes.
Okay, so since So did you watch the movies before you read the books then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so were you surprised when you read Faramir's character? Because he takes such a departure from his path in the book and like his qualities and features in the book that he does in the and I could give a separate TED Talk about that too, about movie Faramir. So when a lot of people hear you or me say Faramir's the best, but they're probably just thinking about movie Faramir.
There was
who's a jerk.
There was a lot of argument about that on that video too. And I still think movie Faramir has like good qualities. Like I don't hate him as much as some people do, because I already knew, like before I fully read the books, there was a lot of stuff that I was kind of aware of that was going to be different. A lot not that I wasn't aware of, but one of the things that I was like very aware of was the differences in Faramir. So I wasn't like shocked or disappointed. I kind of knew what it was going into it, and although I do think that book Faramir is like insanely much more of a better character, I still like movie Faramir. Like I don't hate him. I can't.
See, I just come at it from the mindset of like, movie Faramir, I can't blame you because Peter Jackson made you do this.
Right, exactly. Like I get story-wise why that needed to happen, like why Sam and Frodo needed to be like I get building that, because Sam and Frodo don't really have that much action and stuff happening in that part of their story.
That's the funniest part to me is that Sam and Frodo's side of the Lord of the Rings, which is the main plot of Lord of the Rings, is, in my opinion, what the more boring, uneventful side.
Totally. That was the hardest part to get through in Two Towers, was those chapters, because I found them infinitely more. I mean, the movie does such a good job of going back and forth, and I was used to that.
You have to do it like that.
The way that it was chunked up, how he just did the really interesting story and then the not as interesting story, I was like, oh, this is like a drag to get through. Faramir was only like saving grace of that part of the story.
Oh my! See, that's why I say I love Faramir. Like one of my reasons why I love him so much is because when you're reading Two Towers, it's like Sam, Frodo, Gollum.
They're so weary. Everybody's weary.
No one's happy.
It's sad. Yeah. It's just a sad, kind of depressing part of the book because they're tired, they're hungry, they don't know where they're going. Gollum keeps trying to kill them. Like it's just like not.
And then like
exciting.
You meet Faramir, and you're like, oh my gosh, this new character. Like, ooh, is he cool?
Is he good? Is he
and
bad?
Then you find out he's in fact very cool. He's like, great, let me help you.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I could. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway. Well, speaking of parts of Tolkien that are a drag to get through.
Oh boy.
We come to chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms. And I was warned about this chapter by some previous guests who said like, oh yeah, there's this one chapter that's just all about maps. And I didn't, at the time I was like, oh, that sounds boring, but I'm sure it won't be that bad. I like literally the first like 3 sentences I was like, "Oh no, I'm not going to do well with this chapter
Luckily,
at all."
it's pretty short. I think that's the one thing it's got going for it, that
It felt too long to me.
Like you get to the end, you're like,
it could have been longer. It could have been longer.
Tolkien,
That's true.
Yes, it could have been longer.
Yeah. So like this chapter broke me.
That broke me. I'm done.
It truly broke me. I made it to okay. So the main problem, or not the main problem, one of the things that like truly broke me is that in this first chapter, it's talking about Angband and Melkor and his, fortress and Autumno, and it just references Arid Engren, the Iron Mountains. In this one paragraph, it says Arid Engren like 5 times. And so I'm trying to flip back and forth and find it on the map, and I can't find it. And then this is when I pull out Google and I find the interactive Lord of the Rings maps. Unfortunately, there are error codes when you pull up the Beleriand map, and when you click on there's like a timeline tab, or maybe it's the events tab, and you can click on it. It's very great for the Middle Earth map, but for Beleriand, I don't know if it's just my old computer or if just no one has looked at it in a while, but I couldn't pull up the pinpoints on the map that showed the different events, so I couldn't find it, and I'm Google searching. Come to find out, the Iron Mountains are not on this map at all.
Yeah.
They are much more north of everything.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of when I really lost it, is because I had spent like 15 minutes like, staring at my book trying to be like, which mountain are the Iron Mountains, not the shadowy mountains, not the echoing mountains.
Always has 3 names, so you don't always know, because like what he refers to in the paragraph might not be what it's called on the map, and you're like,
yes, yes. Oh my gosh. And sometimes it'll be the Sindar name, and sometimes it's the Noldor name, which I find interesting. Yeah. And I just like there was one point where I was just reading the same sentence over and over, trying to picture things in my head, and like I promise y'all, I went into this with such an open mind. I was like, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be fine, I'm gonna pull up a map, it's gonna be fine, we're gonna be organized. And I could not do it. I lost it, and this is where I was like tweeting, I was making TikToks, I was losing my mind, and I think I have transitioned into, I think the Silmarillion is actually the worst, because I have really truly been trying to give it an open mind, a fair shot, but like it necessitates every one of my brain cells, and I have none left at this point.
This is the chapter I wouldn't blame people for giving up on. Like I always think like, oh, you just gotta get past that part. You just got to get past that part. And then you get here and you're like, oh, is it even worth it?
Yeah. If I had the choice, if I like knew how bad this was ahead of time, I would have just skipped this chapter.
Yeah. I feel like if there's any, I mean, it does have like, for the sake of saying you read it kind of thing, and it does mention some important like people and places, but I feel like if there's any chapter to forgo, then it's this one.
Yes. To summarize, the important tidbits you get out of this chapter are the like political territories of which of Fingolfin's and which of Feanor's sons have rule over which areas, essentially. And there are some like other geographical of like, this river is really big, and then there's this other also really big river.
Basically describing the map. Like he drew, I don't know what order they came in, I don't know if he wrote it then drew it, or drew it then wrote
That's what I was wondering too.
But he's literally just going through and saying like what is on the map.
Like if he got mugged by Beleriand and then went to the police station, and they were like, and they
you
got a like character artist in to draw it,
give us
and he's like, yeah, let me
sketch.
describe it to you.
That is
so in the north there are these mountains, and then a little bit southwest of this is this river, and it goes this way, and
yep, that's a perfect description.
I think we might see a little transition in the podcast just because, like, again, I'm really trying to give it a fair shot, but we're at chapter 14 now. Yeah. And, like, the amount of times people are like, oh, you just got to get into this part of the story. You just got to get into this, into this, into this. And I'm like, okay, but by that point, the book is mostly over.
You're still not into it, and then,
Yeah. And also the annoying thing on my part of like podcasting and planning is that we're not even going to get to the last section that's called the Rings of Power and the Third Age. Yeah. We're not even going to get to that section in time for the series Rings of Power.
Oh gosh. No.
Yeah. We are just going to finish the numbered chapters in time to start covering the series by the time the series premieres. And like, if I didn't care about like capitalizing on the hype of the episodes coming out each week, I would just finish the Silmarillion and then watch the show. But I want to watch it live with everyone, you know? So I want to talk about it with everyone. I don't want to have to like be in a bubble for like another 3 months and then come out and be like, hey, I'm ready to watch this. And everyone's like, we did that already.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. Everyone's over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing a transition of... So that being said, that's why I think it's coincidentally a great chapter for you to come on, because you're someone... Because, like, I was tweeting things like, there's no way people read this voluntarily. There's no way people read this book and are like, this is great.
I feel like if there's anybody to advocate for the Silmarillion after a chapter like this, it is me.
Yes, so like come on, I think it's going to be a lot of people coming on and advocating for the Silmarillion, and me being like, this is the most insane piece of literature. Like, Tolkien didn't need to do this.
Oh, absolutely not. Like, it is kind of unfathomable to read this chapter and think like one person just pulled this out of thin air. Like, where did he come up with all this? And he's telling it so, matter of factly. Like, this is the geography of this land.
Yes.
Like,
he is telling it to you as if he is, listing off the 50 states of the United States.
Yes, it is so confidently stated that this is what this planet/land looks like.
Yeah, like the sky is blue, the grass is green, the Iron Mountains are in the north.
It's like he's seeing it with his own eyes. Like he's describing it like he's like Lewis and Clark, like he's been to these places, and he's saying like, this is what's there and this is what it looks like. And for someone like me, like who struggled to picture the parts of the Lord of the Rings books that aren't in the movies, like we'd get to somewhere that hadn't been in the movies and I would be like, I have no idea what this looks like. Something like this is like totally unfathomable and like impossible to, unless I don't know if there are some people out there that have really good like mental images of things and can read something and picture it in their head, but I cannot do that. So the map in this chapter especially is essential. Crucial.
Yes. Listeners, I will leave links in the episode description to different resources. I wish I could say, oh, I found these helpful, but like this is a really confusing chapter. So it's like, how can something be helpful when it's the hardest chapter so far? But I did like turn to these resources to help guide me through and get me to some semblance of because I was like, if I was reading this in high school, I would just skim through it and not care. But like, I have to sit down and talk about this. Yeah. I have to be the host of a podcast and talk about this for an hour.
I have to explain this to other people. Like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Let's do this. So we start off by describing, the north, the part that isn't on the map in the book at all. Where we already know all this stuff, basically. There's a lot in this chapter that, we already know this. And then there's a lot that's like, oh, this is kind of like foreshadowing at things to come. And this is kind of catching us up to speed on what's most recently happened. So it describes the Iron Mountains in the north, where Melkor built Autumno and later built Angband.
Yeah.
We also know that during his battle with the Valar, before he was captured, that those things got destroyed and he was taken to Valinor. But Angband was not wholly destroyed, and that's where things like Balrogs and orcs and this pesky little guy named Sauron were able to survive. Cool. That's great.
Yep.
Then... There, to the west of that is the Land of the Mist, Hill Silome.
Right.
Great. Named by the Noldor.
Which is Hithlum. Hithlum is the Sindar name for it. And I think that's what
that Hithlum? Okay, that's what I thought at first. And then I was like, wait a minute, that... Because it starts with I saw H, I saw an H, I saw an I, I saw an L, and so my brain immediately was like, oh yeah, Hithlum, whatever. And then reading it just now, I was like, that does not say Hithlum.
It's the Quenya, it's Hisilome, I think is how you say it. Don't quote me on that.
Cool.
But you can call it Hithlum.
We know we've experienced some of Hithlum and Mithrim. Mithrim is within Hithlum, to remind everyone. That was a key part of our previous chapter. I think Mithrim is where Feanor died. Fingolfin and Fingon, his son. So reminder for everyone, Fingolfin is the second son. Feanor died. So technically the kingship should go to his oldest son, Maedhros. But Maedhros, in a sign of goodwill towards his uncle and cousins who they abandoned over in Valinor. Whoops. Handed the lordship over to Fingolfin.
Yes.
And this was very much like, oh, egad.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yes.
Let's see. Yeah, so they have territory over Hithlum and Mithrim. Lots of chief fortresses mentioned in this chapter. And my thing reading this chapter, I'm like, you know what? If things are important enough, I will remember, like, as I keep reading, I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that being mentioned previously.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything in this chapter that you have to, like, commit to memory to understand anything in the future. There are, like, mentions of things, but like you said, you'll remember if it's important, and if it's super important, I have a feeling Tolkien will bring it up again. He's never shied away from describing things in as many words as he can. So I'm pretty sure he would reiterate it if it was that important.
This is true. Yeah, he is not one to leave a loose end. So
no.
This is coming, from a book that is entirely like tying up loose ends. Cool. They do that territory. Awesome. And then there is Nevrost, and that is controlled by Turgon the Wise, son of Fingolfin. And a reminder for everyone, in the previous chapter, Turgon and Finrod were given these weird dreams by Olmo, and they're like, what does that mean? And I believe Turgon went on like a solo quest and found some hidden mountain, and we haven't seen yet what that turns into. We haven't seen it in the story what that turns into, but on the map I can see it's called Gondolin, and I'm pretty sure that's important because that sounds like a very familiar name to me. So
yes, Gondolin,
we'll get there.
I don't know if that's like spoilers, but yes, Turgon becomes the king of Gondolin, which is like just an important elvish city later on.
And I'm also pretty sure, flipping ahead to chapters to come, I saw the title of The Fall of Gondolin. So
yeah.
So I'm sure that'll come too.
Oh, it does. Yeah. You'll hear a lot more about Turgon later on.
What I find interesting about Nevrost that it mentions is that this is a place where a lot of Noldor and Sindar have come, and they've kind of come to like coexist together.
Yeah.
Because it was this area that Olmo and Ose had been wont to come in days of old. So being, people of the water, they are going to go to where, their gods would be known to go. Maybe they'll show up there again. Who knows? But probably not. I don't know. But they're like, well, if we're going to see him again, this is where it's going to happen. So let's be here just in case.
Right. And you know, elves, like men, especially the elves that sort of tried to make their way to Valinor, get lost along the way, like they settled by the sea. So, I mean, just like humans did, you know, you settle by water. So that's important about Neverest, is that it is by the ocean. It's like right by the water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where
yes,
they meet back up. You know, the elves that didn't quite make it to Valinor, and then the elves that are coming from Valinor, that's where they sort of meet back up.
And I appreciate the mention of like they're coexisting peacefully, because
it doesn't always happen.
up until now, it's just been like a lot of these different factions of like the Vanyar, the Noldor, the Teleri, and then we have factions of the Teleri, and then there are like 3 factions of the different factions that broke off from the Teleri.
Obviously kind of go a little crazy. Like Feanor has his own little cult going on with all of his sons that, you know, in the previous chapter, they obviously heal those bonds a little bit. But yes, it's nice to see them coexisting a little bit.
Yes. So there is on some mountain. Wait, did I skip? Oh yeah, okay. So north, where the Iron Mountains are. Remember, those are off the map.
Mm-hmm.
So at the actual north of our map in the book, is Ardgallen.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some mountains there that Angrod and Agnor keep watch over. And they kind of do this on behalf of their brother Finrod. Because remember, Finrod built that cool fortress that they'll talk about in a minute. So he's not right up there. But Finarfin. Hang on, I'm trying. Is Finrod one of their brothers?
Which one? Who are you
talking about? Or is Fingon one of their cousins? Is Finrod a brother of Angrod and Agnor? Let me go to the family tree. Oh my god. It's stuff like this. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. But like yes, they're all brothers. Great.
Yes.
Okay, so they're all brothers. Anyway, Finrod has told his 2 brothers to go and keep watch in the north, just in case some, mischief happens with Morgoth.
Right.
There is the Pass of Sirion. There's this where the river Sirion comes by. Whatever. Point is that in the midst of this river, there's this island that is built upon a mighty watchtower named Minas Tirith.
Yes.
And I hope that this is the same Minas Tirith that we later see in Lord of the Rings.
It is not, actually. It is a different Minas Tirith. So this part of Beleriand that we're in right now, so later we might get to it, but the river Gelion is at the very, very west of the map of Middle-earth. So later on we will see this. I don't know if this is like spoilers, but essentially this whole map, everything we're talking about here, by the time of the Lord of the Rings is completely underwater. It doesn't exist anymore. There's like only a very sliver of this map and a sliver of the Middle-earth map that actually meet up. So this is far, far west of the Middle-earth map. So this is just, I don't know if Tolkien ever says how the Minas Tiriths are related, but I mean, one can assume that they just took the name of this Minas Tirith, but they are in fact different. You know how he does, reusing the names.
See, that makes me, I am so furious because there have been so many times reading this so far where it hints at things that I'm like, oh, I think I know what that is. It's talking about like Ungoliant. She goes off into a forest and she dies and she has her babies there. And I'm like, oh, that's got to be like the beginnings of Mirkwood, right? And then it's like, no, actually not. I mean, like the babies she has in there, I guess technically do go off to Mirkwood, but no, that's not. And then I'm like, oh, Ecthelion, is that like a descendant of, Denethor's father? Because I know Denethor is the son of it. And it's like, no, they just reuse the names. And then there's also another elf in here named Denethor. And finally, we got to something that was like, he built a mighty watchtower, Minas Tirith. And I was like, oh, maybe those are that's the beginnings of what they built Minas Tirith in Gondor to be. And I think I literally wrote, please tell me the Minas Tirith Finrod makes is the same Minas Tirith of Gondor.
No, this Minas Tirith is long, long gone by the time of the other one. I don't know why he decided to give an entirely new... So, like, the map that you've been looking at is, like, not relevant at all to anything that happens in the Third Age. I can't remember exactly when this part goes underwater, but I think it's at the end of the Second Age. Don't quote me.
Great. Yes. I cannot wait for everything to sink. You know what? I can't wait. I'm so excited. We're going to count down. Bye. It's just gonna fall into the ocean. Yeah. Also, something worth mentioning that I don't think I necessarily understood until coming across the chapter and doing Google searching is that Beleriand is just the northwest piece of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And so there's like lands and stuff that we're not even talking about and we're not even touching on. And also if you're gonna give me a map in the book, give me a map that's a map of the whole land.
You can look up maps. There are, like, I've seen maps where people connect the Beleriand and the Middle Earth map, but obviously it's the Middle Earth map of the Third Age, not what's happening at the time of...
Yeah.
It's just, so we have no idea what's going on in that section of
and I also,
the world.
I was so confused in the beginning chapters when they're creating Middle Earth and it's talking about like, oh yeah, this thing like Melkor knocked the lamps over and it completely changed everything. And I'm like, well, I don't know how it changed because I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have a map of Valinor, and so I'm like, I don't know where this island is in relation to the beach where these guys are. And
yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Minas Tirith. Yeah, Finrod made this area, but after he makes his fortress, he gives it over to his brother Orodreth. So Orodreth has this little area covered. There's some long paragraphs about the River Sirion and the River Narog. Those are kind of the main rivers. I lied, because there's also the Gellion River that comes up later too.
Basically, what you need to know is the River Sirion is smack dab in the middle of Beleriand. So when he's talking about east versus west, he's talking about east versus west of the river. And like when he's speaking about there's one point where he says the left hand on Sirion's left hand, he's talking about East Beleriand because the rivers are flowing from the mountains into the Bay of Valar. So if you are the river, if you're standing on the river as it flows, the left hand of the river is East Beleriand. Which
I know what part you're talking about, and that because like I had the map pulled out and I'm like, wait a minute, the things you're describing are not to the left of the river; they are on the right side of the river.
Yeah.
What? And then I was like, are you supposed to be to use some like theater terminology, when you're in a play, the stage directions are named from the perspective of the actor. So stage left is actually, if you were watching in the audience and the director tells the actor on stage, go stage left, they actually go to your right. So I was like, is this like a stage left, stage right?
And the river...
Okay, great.
Nargog is just one that, like, it's like a tributary of Sirion. It flows through Nargothrond, which is Finrod's whole deal. So that is West Beleriand. Yes. So it kind of flows from West Beleriand, kind of meets up with Sirion, and then Gellion is over far to the east. That's the one where it makes up the little tributaries of Assyriand.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think those are the three most important rivers. He does mention other ones, but like Aros is another one that I think flows into Sirion. So I guess there's 4 important rivers.
What is more annoying to me is that it mentions later that the river Gellion diverges off into 7 other rivers. Yes,
those are the rivers that are at the very edge. So like the Ered Luin are right to the east of those 7 rivers, and that is the far west of the map of Middle-earth, like the Blue Mountains, Ered Luin.
Anywho, so, yeah, there's some rivers. Also worth mentioning, Nargothrond, his fortress, again, detailed the building of in the previous chapter. It's worth mentioning that he's in a pretty, like, safe place. He builds a, like, watchtower on the sea to the west, just in case Morgoth comes up that way. But it says that Morgoth would never build ships or make war by sea. Water all his servants shunned, and to the sea none would go willingly. Wait, what? You get the point. Whatever. They're not gonna go.
They
in
don't
the water,
like the water.
So
yeah.
Great. Also, another thing worth mentioning, because Nargothrond is kind of by the coast where some of those Teleri were, made settlements that were discussed several weeks ago now at this point. I don't remember when. Círdan was the shipmaker. Was kind of their leader. I was like, oh no, here come the Noldor, and they're just gonna stamp all over these elves who have, like, made their settlements and villages, and they've been living their lives in this land, and then here come the Noldor to just be like, we're here now, this is our land. But luckily, Círdan and Finrod have a friendship and an alliance, and it seems to be a pretty, peaceful land there.
Yes, I feel like Finrod does a good job of being in his little kingdom right now. Yes, because Círdan's like on the coast, building his little ships as he does.
Oh, no, never mind. I was going to say, oh yeah, and reminder, Finrod is the one who went and saved Maedhros from Morgoth. Nope, that was Fingon.
Fingon, yes. So many Fins.
I hate all of these names. I hate all these names. It's dumb. It's dumb.
Finrod, Fingon, Fingolfin, Finarfin. Like, there's so many.
What I find hilarious is that, so you have like you have a lot of similar sounding names. You have Angrod and Egnor, Maedhros, Maglor.
There's also Emrod,
and then it's
and
like
Emrest.
Yeah, Emrod, Emrest, and then it's like Turgon.
Just a random.
Oh yeah, and then Galadriel.
Yes, I was gonna say, like, they went really off script with Galadriel there.
Oh my gosh, I feel like that must have been a point where, like, Tolkien's already, by the time he's, like, getting into Silmarillion's, like, details, like, the names of all the different sons and grandsons and stuff and whatever.
Yeah.
He's probably, by that point, Galadriel's already an existing character, so he has to be like, oh, man, I wish I had, like, named her. Yeah, and so, like, and she doesn't match with everyone else.
Right.
Because he had already, like, made her name. Let's see. Why did I hire? Oh, that's right. They also make over in the Finrod's land in Nargothrond, kind of by the coast. They make a refuge. It says a last refuge if evil came on the great Isle of Balar. But thankfully they actually. It doesn't say, like, oh, but they never had to go there. It just says, but it was not their fate that they should ever dwell there. So something else might happen where even dwelling there wouldn't save them.
Right.
Interesting wording, I just kind of noticed.
It is.
And then it mentions that Finrod had, like, the greatest realm and, like, the greatest ruling of everyone, even though he was the youngest of the great lords of the Noldor. And this is where I need to... That's right. He is Fingolfin's... No. He is Finarfin's... No.
Yes, he's Finarfin's... Wait, are you talking about Finrod? Finrod is Finarfin's eldest son. I believe he is also... So it's Finrod, Galadriel, and then Egnor and... What's the other one? Egnor and Angrod. They are all siblings. Okay.
He's, the son of the youngest of Finwë's sons who didn't even come over to Beleriand. So, on paper, he shouldn't have, rule over supposedly the greatest area. But
no.
But he does. Cool. Yay.
Good for Finrod.
It does still say, though, that, even that like, Fingolfin is still Lord of the Noldor. It's not like people are like, oh yeah,
Right.
I mean, Fingolfin's technically our lord, but we more look to Finrod. Together with Fingon ruling over Hithlum, things are going great. And their people were the most hardy and valiant and most feared by the orcs and most hated by Morgoth. So they're doing pretty good. Yay.
Yeah, I feel like being hated by Morgoth is a good thing.
And then is where I kind of just stopped looking at the map.
Okay.
As I was reading it.
That's fair.
So they're just kind of worth noting. It mentions that the empty land of Dimbar under the peaks of Chrysaegrem is where the eagles are.
Yes.
And I believe that's kind of like, let me see. Oh no. Let me go to the other map.
Yeah, there's a lot of mapping.
Dumbar. Oh yeah, there we go. So that's kind of like in the middle of Beleriand. It's near Doriath, where Thingol and Melian have reign over everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just found that interesting that like, oh, we know where the eagles live. That's great.
Yeah.
Let's go track them down next time. And then this is also the no land of Nan Dungortheb.
Yes.
Is where Ungoliant had fled after her encounter with what's his face, Morgoth.
Yeah.
And the Balrogs. And this is where she supposedly withered away and died. And I always love the way that Tolkien writes about Shelob and Ungoliant, but he's so descriptive, and like the imagery he uses when he's describing like darkness.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's so good, and like reading this dry, dense chapter. And then we get to like this one little bit where I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it says, there she dwelt a while, filling the ravines with her deadly gloom, and there still, when she had passed away, her foul offspring lurked and wove their evil nets, and the thin waters that spilled from arid Gorgoroth were defiled and perilous to drink. For the heart, this is all one sentence, by the way, listeners. For the hearts of those that tasted them were filled with shadows of madness and despair. All living things else shunned that land, and the Noldor would pass through Nan Dungortheb only at great need. So yeah, I'm just like, what a like random like poetic description to throw in the middle of this map chapter.
Oh yeah. And I do think it's interesting that he places it above Doriath, like sort of right above the girdle of Melian. I was like, I just thought like geographically that's interesting. Like you'd think she would go up to like Angband and up there somewhere dark and deep, but she kind of just goes just at the foot of these mountains, in between the mountains and the forest where Doriath is. I don't know. I always found that weird.
Yeah. And, like, obviously when Thingol and Melian were setting up their land, they wouldn't know that, like, hey, one day this evil spider is going to come right on the edge of our property, you know. But yeah, it is, like, they are, like, very close to this, like, evil and darkness where, like, no one goes.
Yeah.
There's also, like, nearby this land, is Dor Dinin, the Silent Land. So just a lot of, just like, we don't go to those places.
Yeah, but, you know, they have a name. They're on the map anyway, even though there's no significance to them being there. Classic.
So below that are the guarded woods of Doriath, abode of Thingol, the hidden king, into whose realm none passed save by his will. And I was like, I know that part.
Yep.
Great. I got that.
Familiar.
I got that
yes.
down.
We know all about Melian and Thingol and Doriath at this point, so
I understand all of that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It mentions this one part, I think it's within the girdle of Melian. So remember the part that her like little protective bubble where it's kind of in dedication to Ulmo. And there are like great oak trees. So it just sounds like a really beautiful part of the forest, I guess.
Yeah, she just wanted to have part of the river Sirion flow through her land as to be in reverence of Ulmo. Like it says, so that some portion of Sirion which she loved in reverence of Ulmo should be wholly under the power of Thingol. So like that Thingol is protecting at least some part of this river in reverence to Ulmo. Oh,
this is what, sorry, I skipped something and I wanted to go back to it. It mentions, when it's describing Nan Dungortheb, right before it starts saying like, oh yeah, this is where Ungoliant went, it says, that region was filled with fear, for upon its one side the power of Melian fenced the north march of Doriath, but upon the other side, blah, blah, blah. So, oh wait, no, hang on. Never mind. I misread that. I thought it was saying like, oh yeah, people feared this area because it was so close to the power of Melian and they were afraid of her if you like went wrong into her territory. But it's saying on the other side is where that is. So never mind. I misread that completely. Moving on to a long paragraph all about rivers that I did not care about.
Yeah, I feel like you can probably skip that part. I would say, are you talking about like the Eros?
Yeah, it says where Eros flowed, and then it starts talking about with it, it's the river
Gelion,
and then it also mentions Sirion, it mentions Narog. So it mentions all these different, oh yeah, and then I also had to look up a new word. I had to look up mere, M-E-R-E, because I have only ever used it in, I guess as an adjective. And I'm like, okay, what is a mere? And it's literally just like another word for like a little body of water. And I'm like, why not say pond?
Just say pond?
Why not say lake? Also, at some point, he uses the word bulwark. Had to look that up too. And it had like some religious connotations to it, like some this idea of using like religion as a defense against not bad things, but like a defense against stuff, but sometimes used improperly. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, but like it was getting to all these connotations. I'm like, I don't have time for this. I'm trying to read a map.
Yeah, literally.
And then it starts talking about some waterfalls and Osirian and Gelion and all we need to know about. Actually, I say that, but all it mentions is that there's an island or something off of, I think in Osirian by the Land of Seven Rivers. That's why it's named Osirian. Where this river goes around, it like goes into two parts and then it like goes around something and then it like converges. And that land, that little island is named Tol Galen, the Green Isle. There, Baron and Luthien dwelt after their return.
Yes,
so
that is one part of this that is important. That it calls to other characters, like what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I really, you know what? No, I just don't think we need this chapter at all.
Well, also, I would like to point out later in that that paragraph, it says, where the green elves dwelt in Osiriand, says they were clad in green in spring and summer, and the sound of their singing could be heard even across the waters of Gelion. Wherefore the Noldor named that country Lindon, the land of music, and the mountains beyond they named Arid Lindon, for they first saw them from Osirion. And that is important for the Lord of the Rings show, because one of the places that we're going is Lindon. So that gives you a little context of where Lindon will be in, like, on this map in the show. Like, I don't know if the map will look exactly like this. I can't quite remember if this is like relevant to the Second Age, but that is the same Lindon as we will be seeing in the show. So
okay, well then even more evidence I think for you can just skip this because you're gonna see it later.
See it later.
You're gonna watch the movie later. Like when you go into when you go into English class and you just watch the movie version of Pride and Prejudice or Great Gatsby or something. Also, and when I say when you watch the movie version of Great Gatsby, children, I went to high school before there was a Leonardo DiCaprio version of Great Gatsby. And so the movie version that we watched in class is like from the 50s. And all I remember is the scene where they're all in like the hotel, like kind of right before the climax, like as things are kind of coming to a head. And it just mentions that like it's the hottest day of the year. There's obviously no air conditioning and everyone's just sweating. And the way that the actors in this scene were just like, they must have had buckets of water off screen, just like throwing them onto, and they're all just like yelling at it. It was the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. Anywho,
I don't think I ever saw that version. I think we just read it. I don't remember ever watching the movie version of that in high school. I think we just read the book and we're like,
I'm trying to remember. I think that was towards like towards the end of the year when the teacher's like, sure, let's watch the movie version.
Yeah.
Great. Yay. So there's Lindon.
Yeah.
That'll be back.
Yes.
And then kind of again touched on in the previous chapter, east kind of, or I guess I would say southeast of where Morgoth is.
Yeah.
It says the marches of Beleriand that were most open to attack. And so this is the March of Maedhros where he went to dwell with the rest of Feanor's sons, essentially, kind of in this general region, because it's the most open to attack from Morgoth. And I just kind of love that about Maedhros, that it's like it's like almost like self-deprecating, that he's like, self-sacrificing, that he's like, you know what? Our people, my family did wrong. So we're going to go and we're going to be in charge of the place that Morgoth is most likely to attack. And we'll be there. And, we'll be the first soldiers on the front line if that happens. Yeah. But I appreciate that about him. Yeah, and this area is Maedhros. And then there are... Oh, I thought this was... Again, kind of going with that like self-sacrificing thing. The chief citadel is upon the hill of Himring, the Evercold. Yeah. So just this idea that this is this like
barren
area, barren. Something is named Evercold, so it's cold, like it's miserable, like it's like he's sent himself into exile almost, and like an exile in shit, because like technically they did already. Exile from Valinor. Yeah, like an exile of shame. Like, okay, we're just gonna go over to the most, of Beleriand. We're gonna go to the most like northeast corner. Like, we're just gonna tuck ourselves away from everyone else. Don't worry about us.
Yeah, and they're not protected. Like, Angron and Egnor are up there too, but they've got those mountains. But like Maedhros and Maglor and Caligorm and Curdafin are all up there in this same area, just like, I guess, freezing their butts off.
Yeah. It does mention that there are some areas that they like fortify and strengthen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, Caranthir. Yeah, that's right. Caranthir fortified the mountains to the east of Maglor's Gap. And remember, this is also where he comes in contact with some dwarves. Is over in this land.
Yes.
Where's the name?
The land of Caranthir. And here it was that Noldor first met the dwarves. It just says Dor Caranthir.
Okay. I thought it mentioned Beglor. Beglor?
Thargelion?
No, never mind. Don't worry about it. So yeah, it just says the sons of Feanor under Maedhros were the lords of East Beleriand. So they're over there. And then, Fingolfin.
Yeah.
Wait, no. Yes, Fingolfin
and Finrod and Fingon are all
have
in
East Beleriand, essentially. West Beleriand. No, wait. Yes, West Beleriand. Oh my god. And yeah, cool. It ends with, but none of the Noldor ever went over arid Lindon while their realm lasted. I feel like that's important to note, while their realm lasted.
Yes. So this is why he's explaining why they don't go over the mountains into the other areas of Middle Earth. They don't. I don't know why.
They never got around to it. And then, they sank into the sea. And little news and late came into Beleriand of what passed in the regions of the east.
Yeah. So they're not like talking about it or anything. Obviously, some of them make it there eventually, but that's the key point where he says, well, their realm lasted.
And so concludes, I would say, the worst piece of literature I've ever read in my life.
I like that he has such a good grasp on the history and like the stories of these people, like, because he's painting you a picture. Like, I have some notes here. So it says in the north, that's Morgoth. In the west, there's Hithlum, which is held by Fingolfin and Fingon. They've got two separate places there. And then there's Nevras with Turgon, Nargothrond with Finrod, and then we didn't mention this, but Brithombar, which is where Círdan is. That's just what it's called. And then, in the east, you've got the Sons of Feanor. So I like that he's kind of painting this picture of, like, where they started, where they go, where they end up. Like, it is sort of important if you want to understand the story of like a specific character. Like if you're really interested in Finrod, you like want to know what Finrod's been doing, then I would say this chapter is slightly more valuable to you than to anybody else. But yeah, he's basically just describing the map. So if you don't have it in front of you, it's going to be really hard to picture what he's talking about.
Yeah. Impossible. And like, this is coming from someone who I love playing open world. Maybe that's why I don't like this chapter, is because I love playing open world video games and just running around and finding things for myself, you know? And in this chapter, instead, it's him detailing every geographical land point that we are going to be touching for the next, 10 chapters. Right. Or 14 chapters. I forget. Oh, yeah. I guess we're kind of halfway through the Silmarillion, sort of, kind of, because, like, we're more than halfway through the chapters, but then there are also the 2 introduction sections, but then there are also 2 sections at the end, and they are very long. Yeah. So I don't know when we reach a halfway point. Yeah.
Hard to say.
I feel so defeated from this chapter. I hope to God it gets better, or it at least goes back to being what it was.
It does. It does. I think he's just using this chapter as like a setup. That way, for me, it was important for me when I was reading this to be able to picture where things were in relation to each other. And like picture where certain people were going and coming from. Like that just was easier for me to understand the like vague, overarching plot that he's describing. So when he talks about stuff in the future, I mean, he's sort of using this chapter to set that up and also give context for things that might have happened in the past. So I get why it's in there, because this is very much a history textbook. He's not writing a novel. He's writing the history of Middle Earth. So that is why it's more dense and not as literature-y. It's more just like textbooky, I would say.
Yeah. I agree with so much of what you're saying of like, I would also love to know where things are in relation to each other. But the way that he does it, where he uses 3 different names for one place, and then as he's saying like the river, blah, 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 flowed through this land, but as he's describing where it flowed through, it's like he'll detour off and like instead of just complete the one thought. If I'm like, hey, where are the Iron Mountains in relation to Thingol and Mellion's land? And a normal person would be like, north. And Tolkien would be like, well, it's on the outermost edges of Beleriand, and southwest and east-west of that is this land. And when you go to the west, you encounter these mountains. And then when you go to the east, you encounter this river. And if you go upriver, then you find Thingol and Melion. Does that answer your question? And I'm like, no.
He is not one for being concise in his answers. And that's why, again, I will reiterate how important the map is, because he doesn't, I think he does his best to kind of he goes from west to east, sort of, but he sort of like starts in the north and he kind of goes down, and then he kind of goes back up, and then he goes down, and then he goes up, and then he goes down. So it's like sort of a west to east, but in a very zigzaggy way. So unless you have a fantastic mental map of what he can, like what he's saying, if you can translate that into a landscape in your head, which I don't know if anybody can do that, you need to have like some sort of visual representation. And I think he's more so doing it for like the characters, like the most important thing I would say for anybody to take away from this chapter is just who is living where. That's really all you need to know, is the important characters, where they are. That is like the biggest takeaway, I think, because everything else is just a little, unless you just really want to be like a trivia master, like unless you want to be able, if somebody asks you like, all right, where's this person in relation to this person in this age, unless you want to be able to answer that question with absolute certainty, I don't think there's a reason to obsess over this chapter and like reread it and figure out.
Oh, I will not be.
Things, like...
I don't think I even read it the one time. I'll be like, I read it and I was like, I don't think I wrote any. I didn't. I don't know what I just did. Like what happened. I will summarize my thoughts with this idea. They say a picture paints 1,000 words. Well, Tolkien used 1,000 words, and for me, painted no pictures.
Oh my gosh.
Emily, thank you for coming on and helping us through this chapter.
You're
Dear
welcome.
God.
I can do it.
Where can people find you on the internet, and what would you like to share with the audience?
You can find me on TikTok and Twitter at Silmaremily. It's just the beginning of the Silmarillion and then my name, Emily. And yeah, if you have made it this far in listening and reading, I commend you. I know I have a very unpopular opinion about this particular book. So yeah, everybody, you're doing a great job. If you're getting through it, you don't have to enjoy it.
I think that's what like this podcast is at this point with the Silmarillion is you're getting through it.
Yeah.
You don't have to enjoy it.
People to talk about it with. Like that's what makes it easier is to talk about it, to talk through it with other people. And to just like have those conversations and connections about it, because that's really what like Tolkien's all about.
That's What I'm Tolkien About is a proud member of WBNE. If you want to learn more about the network, you can go to WBNE.org. The cover art is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Tolkien About by going to tpublic.com/user/TolkienAboutPod. You can follow the podcast on social media at TolkienAboutPod. You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at MCWhatsup and on Instagram at MCTurnDownForWhat. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod. For $3 a month, you can join the Discord server that is less than a Starbucks Frappuccino. Inflation, man. In the Discord server, I've received a lot of support for my sharp mental decline that this chapter caused me. So if you want to support me and my mental health, you can join the Discord server. Or you can become a sponsor of the podcast like Mott's. Now, Mott's, this is where I would usually say thank you so much for your support, but you did just tell me via Twitter that you have a Boromir Funko Pop. I can't have that. I just want to know, like, of all the why would you get a Funko Pop of Boromir? Like, there's so many other characters that if you're going to invest money in a Funko Pop, like, why wouldn't you get, Sam or Gandalf or Aragorn or Faramir? They probably don't even have a Faramir Funko Pop. Anyway, Mott's, despite this betrayal, I still very much appreciate your support and thank you. Now, next week, we are going to take a break from the Silmarillion because, as you can tell by now, I need it. And also, it's Pride Month, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring back Reverend Tom Emanuel so he can talk about his lecture series that he did at the beginning of this year called Queer and Back Again. And I just think that sounds like a fascinating topic, and he's excited to talk about that. So you don't have to do any preparation for next week's episode. You just get to tune in and learn something new. I feel so tired. I'm so tired. I need to go lie down for an hour.
I need to go lie down for 45 minutes. No, an hour. A full hour.
Oh, what? I want to keep going. Let's do chapter 15. All right.
I need ice cream and I feel like I need to like go into the fetal position and just like I need to go watch something. I need to go watch something mindless right now. Oh my gosh. Like literally no one asked me to think anything for the next 24 hours.
A lot of brain power.
Okay. Thank you again for coming on. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
No, just thanks for having me. I would love to come back next time. You have a really complicated chapter. Just let me know. I will do my best to advocate for finishing the Silmarillion.
Oh my gosh, just like starts crying immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. And that's what I'm talking about.